Hey gang, welcome back. It's I, DrBossKey, and today we're going to talk about the evolution of the Lost Soul Wisp, an enemy that we have in the game, and the struggles we've had from the fact that this enemy behaves differently than almost any other enemy in the game, and I'll talk you through it. So, based on playtesting, here we are. All right, so this is, let's see here. Let me turn down the music real quick. No music for you, of course, but there is music in the game. All right, perfect. All right, so we have this enemy, and the enemy is called the Lost Soul Wisp, which you see right here. And this enemy basically is invulnerable, and so it blocks all shots, can't be destroyed, can't be bombed in this case, and it's designed kind of like a landmine. And when you get close, it explodes, and then you get
hull damage.
Yeah, bad stuff happens, right? So the thing is from playtesting, people get to this enemy, and they kind of figure it out over time, but they're like, is it a power up? Because it was just glowy at one point, and kind of looked like maybe a power up, I guess. People are, of course, trying to shoot it, and it doesn't die. And we didn't have a way to do conveyance to let players understand that it's not a killable enemy. And so what we have done in order to fix that, hopefully, we'll see, we'll got to go through more playtesting, is we did a couple things. So one, we increased the glowy area to kind of suggest an AoE effect. The dotted line is to give you this kind of proximity indicator. And when you cross that indicator, it then explodes. But it explodes on a delay, right, as you can see here, which is right, because I want people to fly over these things, right? But you also want people to be able to nudge them if you want there too. So the other thing is that for the longest time, up until today, I think we just solved that, we added conveyance. So if the player tries to shoot it, a very nice like negative effect. And I don't do it on every bullet impact. I do it based on an evaluation of health, even though the enemy can't ever be killed.
Hull damage.
So it's something like this. So it gives the player that reinforced idea that, hey, something's going differently than any other hit sound in the game. The hit sound probably still needs work there, but it's supposed to be more of a negative conveyance. So to give them the clue that something is different. And here it is with a... So you get somewhere between 2 and 5 doings, if you will. And it was important for me to not have those doings happen, the negative sound effects, when you explode, right? Because then you would be taking and conveying the same sound effect that you're trying to suggest that something isn't working like it should be. And then if you kill the enemy and then have that sound effect play, the problem you have is that you have this, you don't have a consistent rule set for players to start to learn from the hints you're giving them. Basically, all games are conveyance of information, and that information ideally builds a rule set that players can intuit over time through all of their senses, and then start to understand what those rules are from that conveyance. Okay, so how did we do this? So I've been thinking about this for a while because it keeps coming up, and I've been waiting on the Shmup creator side, the engine I'm using, to give me the ability to override sound effects. So, but I don't know if that's going to get in the engine. So I think we had a solve here. So here's what we did. And I'll just pull this apart real quick so you can see all the good stuff. All right. So basically our Lost Soul Wisp enemy is comprised of a few things. So one, it's the enemy here, and this isn't really a tutorial for that. So this enemy here, we set their HP to 50,000 because we do have bombs in the game, and none of them ever do 50,000 points of damage. So just really high on the spectrum. And then we have the basic version is that when the player goes into this AoE, it triggers the enemy to die. And when that enemy dies, it spawns a second enemy briefly, which is essentially the Lost Soul Wisp explosion. And this also gives us a tiny delay, so you don't get immediately exploded when you go into the AoE. And then what happens is this enemy wakes up, shoots its 360 bullet explosion, and then it winds up getting killed. And no one is the wiser for it. It doesn't have any collision or any of that. And based on that logic, we have basically down here. And I was really surprised I found a way to do this. So Sonny, if you're out there watching, thank you for that, for letting the engine do this, because I didn't think it was going to be possible, but we found a way. So we have a trigger here, and this trigger is set to switch mode. And we're evaluating the connected entity state is all alive. So we're basically saying when this enemy is alive, if that condition is true, continue. And so what we do is we have here you have basically the inputs on the left side, the output is on the right side. So if that condition is true, we then have this line that then comes down from the output. So the output is connected to the input of all these other triggers. And these triggers are the, as we talked about, so this is evaluating the enemy's HP. So in our case, we just said, hey, anytime it takes any kind of damage, that's 4,999 in this case, we're going to then say that condition is true. Also switch mode, so it doesn't stay active. And then we come down here and we play the sound effect. And then the sound effect here is here, and there's nothing really special here. We left a little pitch variation in there because it's always nice to the ears when things aren't exactly the same all the time. A little bit of variance is okay, as long as it doesn't take and pitch shift you into taking a negative sounding effect and then making it sound positive because it's pitch shifted too high. So, and then what we do is we continue to do these evaluations. So at 4,900, 4,900, 49,850, and so forth. So, and that gives us a nice kind of spread because our player damage, the top bullets do 12 points of damage generally per bullet, and the bottom bullets do generally about 250 points of damage. So it gives us a nice spread to kind of control. It's not perfect, but works. And you can see this here. So, so there you can see the condition on the left is being is active as true. We're not killing. And then you can still see it still remains to be true. And then if you come in here, it's because I moved it because I'm a dork. Bloop. There we go. Got to put the AoE in it. So this is a trigger for when the player goes into the zone. That's how we wind up doing the AoE explosion. So we'll go into just runtime preview. And now it can't, now the condition is unhooked, which is great, right? And there's no other way to trigger these things. So that's it. I am super stoked. Now, the sad reality is I have to go across all my levels and every enemy and I have to replace them with this logic because we don't have prefabs or anything like that, like you would have sort of like in the Unity 3D engine. It's a small price to pay because, look, I found a way, and this has made the game better. And it's taken one of the parts of the game, right? So the interesting thing here, right, is that the core shmups dodge, survive, shoot, right? And then from there, it's kind of like there's other goals, but they they're less important, right? So the primary goals are survive, kill the enemies, right? And so what's happening here is normally the player learns shooting your bullets at anything basically is going to kill enemies. But then we have this enemy down here where we flip that script, right? And we're like, hey, no matter what. So, and we use these enemies in this case as blockers, right? In order to essentially block out lanes, right? So like every time we have an enemy in here, and it's not a huge circle because I want to make sure that, like that's maybe a little unfair. I thought about it though. I can still tweak it, but basically within the visual spectrum of the enemy, we block. So it doesn't block all the channel, all the lanes, if you think about it from like a horizontal shmup perspective. But it also means that then players are encouraged to get rid of these enemies because they're basically landmines, ticking time bombs. And because they, if you put an enemy here, if you put an enemy on the backside, it's harder to hit because now you've got one vector of shooting the enemy that is now obscured by this. So it creates a little bit of pressure. And we do that trick across quite a few of the levels in order to get the player to evaluate the dangers, because by itself, it's not dangerous. When you run through it, it's not dangerous. But it does create, a blocking field for player bullets unless they have pass through, because there's some exceptions to that. But it gets you to think about the way you're evaluating each of the screens in terms of risk, how deadly all the risks are on the screen, and if enemies that you don't have to get close to, you can avoid, but if you do explode them, you get points, of course, right? But if you have a bunch of them, then it changes the way that you need to then think about the world itself. There also is a little bonus that I found, is that because you can't kill them in the normal way, you have to kill them by proximity. They also wind up being sort of time releases to keep your multiplier going. So if you have any gaps, and this is one of the ways that I manage some of the slightly slower amounts, so it's not just turned up to 11 all the time with enemies and bullets everywhere. The game gets there, don't get me wrong, But this gives me the ability to let you have a little bit of a breather. You have 6 seconds before, well, after you kill an enemy, you have 6 seconds before before your multiplier. Here, I'll just show you here. So you have the multiplier up in the corner. And when you do damage to an enemy, and let's see, these guys are coming up here in a second. That starts the multiplier, and now the bar is going to tick down over 6 seconds. I can control this, but it's 6 seconds. If you don't kill anything else and that goes to 0, then you lose all your multiplier. And the game is designed to achieve maximum multiplier and to keep that going. So this is how you're going to get the highest scores. And so one of the ways that we get around that, design-wise, of course that, but then now you have a little bit of breather, 6 seconds in eternity to shmup, and then you can, yeah, see? You can keep your multiplier going. Okay, that might have been an extra over-explain. I hope people found this interesting. If you did, feel free to, to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But more importantly, if you have questions or thoughts, considerations, these are the types of things I love thinking about when I'm doing my own designs for shmups, or for my shmup, I should say. And it's possible for the shmup creator community to also do this too. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.